Board. Hi, I'm Sarah Bearup-Neal, Gallery Manager at the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today I'm in conversation with visual artist Joan Richmond of Traverse City, Michigan. Joan works in many media, but recently expanded her practice to include collage. A selection of new collages are on display in the Arts Center Lobby Gallery. This exhibit, Paper plus Scissors plus Glue equals New Collages, may be viewed in the gallery or online at the Arts Center website through April 22. Before we begin, many and continuing thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, and the Amy L. Clark Carroll Family Fund for their support of the Arts Center Exhibitions Program. Welcome, Joan. Thanks for being here today. Let's dive right in. You come from a background of painting and drawing, both as a teacher and a practitioner. So what drew you to collage?
A very good question, and I'm glad you added the component of teacher, because that is how I got to the collage part of my work. I was a teacher at NMC, our local college, and through professional development, I took a series of workshops from a man named Ken Cooley, an artist who uses collage in his own work and teaches the process in his workshops. So by taking those kind of process-focused, visual stimulating, creative workshops, I started working with collage more involved with the process itself than the end product.
In your painting, are you focused on the same end product value, or are you as much involved with process?
I'm involved with the process. I think it's important, but I think what the collage process brings to my painting is how I can reevaluate what I see if I'm looking at a landscape, and really try to break those big shapes in that big universe out there into a series of colors and shapes that then create more the landscape image.
Got it. I'm going to do a little screen share here, and we're going to get some of your work up on the screen. Oops, we don't want that. This first image is called Tux. And let's look at this and have you talk a little bit about the linkage between your painting and drawing and your collage.
So I think the linkage, again, is that whole idea of working with shapes of color. How do they develop an image? There's not a lot of small detail in this piece, and the same way I try to not get involved in too much detail in my painting. I think, by working through collages like this, it helps me reevaluate how I paint, and helps me come back to keeping things simple when maybe things are getting out of control.
Collages are often built from discarded and scrap papers and appropriated imagery. You deviate from that tradition by making your own collage materials.
And again, that's something I learned from Ken Cooley. He sets up his workshops, so what you first do is paint on paper with acrylic paint. I highly recommend Golden paints, because that's the best quality acrylic paint on the market right now. And you get these wide array, this big palette of colors that then you can start to work from. They're just nice, flat, even colors that then you can cut, of course, and break them down into the shapes you desire for the image you're working on.
One of the attractions of collage is that the tools necessary to make one are pretty straightforward and familiar: scissors and glue. I'm going to go bring up another picture here and have you talk a little bit about some of your collage tools.
Oh, the first one I'd like to point out is that little orange scissor up in the upper left of the screen. That's a Frisker scissor. It's very sharp and very pointed. You can really hurt yourself. You got to be careful. And I like that little scissors when I'm working on collage because it really allows you to go in and get small little areas, especially if you're trying to, well, actually, if you like cut out little triangles, little shapes that really kind of are necessary to kind of just tuck in there, that a bigger scissor is just too clumsy to use for that kind of thing. I also, you'll see the X-Acto blade. That's a nice foil off a large regular pair of scissors. The regular pair of scissors can give you a nice curve and relatively straight line, but to get a really nice crisp line, I use that X-Acto blade, and then sometimes play those not so straight lines off those that you get from your scissors off that really crisp line you can get from the blade.
When you're using the X-Acto blade, are you bringing in a ruler at all, or is this freehand cutting?
Excuse me?
When you're using an X-Acto, is it freehand or do you bring in a ruler to help you do the cut?
I use a straight edge to help do the cut so it stays nice and clean. If I wanted a more loose straight line, so to speak, I would use the scissors.
Anyone who's involved with collage knows that there's a confusing array of adhesives. Talk a little bit about the adhesives you use.
Well, one of my favorites, again, is shown in this photo, and that's the Lineco adhesive that's used by bookbinders, actually. It has great adhesive qualities. You paint it on with a brush, and amazingly enough, it can lay a really flat layer. There's no buckling involved, which I don't know how it does that, but it's magic. And it really tucks in the edges of lines. Also, you can wipe it away without a residue showing. Unlike lots of times, for example, with like Elmer's, for example, if you were to wipe away the excess, you still see a little bit of glue when it's dried, where this magically disappears.
Do you have any other adhesives that you use for specific situations?
Actually, yes. So this Cocolina comes as in little buckets with these nice brushes. It kind of melts as you put it on, and that's sometimes really helpful if you're trying to just go in and get a little place. They also make a glue stick. So those two are my second in line when after the Lineco. I also pointing out all these are acid free and pH balanced, so they're archival.
All the collages in this exhibition we have here at the Arts Center are prompted by world events. In the statement you wrote for the exhibition, you said, "This series of collages is a selection from more than 60 pieces I created during COVID-19 isolation. How does one stay creative while fighting off anxiety? I found that making images that were immediate in execution helped me not overthink the process, thus creating a calming, meditative effect." So with that as a backdrop, talk a little bit about how you built your collages. Are they pre-planned, or is the composition a little bit more intuitive? And let me bring up your collage called Kite House.
This set of collages that I worked on are definitely intuitive, both in the process of developing the color palette and in the process of actually constructing the image and the design. If you go back to the color palette, I try to use colors maybe I don't usually use in my landscape work, which tends to be a lot of blue and a lot of green. So when I'm mixing the colors for the collages, I arbitrarily kind of just start trying to familiarize myself with colors that are unfamiliar to me, like yellows and reds. And then kind of going from there, like, do we need some stronger in terms of lighter in value or darker in value, brightness, just making a whole array of these papers to choose from. And then as you start to develop the design itself, you can kind of react both to the other design elements on the page, but also what color is put down first. I try to start with a solid background, and then in two large pieces of color, like for example, this piece has a gray background, and then these two pieces of purple were the first things that go down. Then, but like just kind of like, it's like a little game you play. Okay, we do like, that's one, that's two, and now react to that. So it's totally intuitive in that way. It's not based on what I'm looking at. These are not like, that's not a bow tie in a room. It becomes after it gets constructed.
At what point do you make the commitment to where you've placed things and begin gluing?
I'm sorry, repeat, please.
At what point in the process do you make a commitment to what you've laid down, the composition, and begin gluing?
So I don't glue until I play or with the arrangement of things, and see, what might be kind of fighting in a good tension or complementing itself. So nothing gets glued down until I've kind of arranged things, but I arranged as I go. For example, again, those two purple shapes were moved around a little bit. I found where I'd like to place them, and then I glue those down. Then I go to the next color. So there's like a placement process, glue it down, and then react to that. So it's almost like building up layers with glue in between each time.
Talk a little bit about the role the outside world plays in your work. How does it find its way in, and how does it tend to show up?
In order to answer that question, I'm going to refer to a quote I heard recently by, it's attributed to Bob Dylan, when asked what were his musical influences, and the interviewer was trying to get at, specific people or musicians in his life or music genres. And his response was, well, I'm a musician, I have ears, anything I listen to is an influence. And I think that's a great way to describe how artists develop their reactions to the outside world. It's, at least from the type of work I do, it's not a specific event that creates a moment in my process, but like the same way musicians have ears, artists have eyes, and everything we've seen, we collect in this Rolodex in our brain. And whether it's conscious or not, we pull in those influences over time and assimilate them, and then they somehow work their way out into our canvas or our sculpture or whatever media you're working in.
Human Velcro.
Velcro, okay.
Going through the universe. I want to let people know who are watching this, if they want to look at all of the collages in this exhibition online, go to the Glen Arbor Arts Center website, and that's glenarborart.org. joanrichmond.org. Click on the exhibits tab and then on virtual exhibits. Joan's website is another exciting and immersive experience. She can be found at joanrichmondart.com. And I want to thank you, Joan. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I love how you are able to explain the world and your work. And I know that everyone who looks at your collages will start thinking about paper, scissors, and glue with a different eye right now.
Okay.
So goodbye to everyone, and until next time, good art to everyone. Thanks.